Costello. For those that don't know me, I'm the Chief Exec of the Heart of England Community Foundation. First of all, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come to this event, to hear about the successes, which there have been many, and the challenges of our big lottery fund, co-financed by the European Union, Building Better Opportunities Community Matters programme. So, just really briefly, why did the foundation decide to tender for this piece of work? So back in 2015, we saw the sad closure of Birmingham and Black Country Community Foundation, and my board made the decision to extend its geography to cover these areas. We wanted to demonstrate and show our commitment, particularly to the voluntary and community sector, that we were here today and not just to parachute in, deliver a programme and go. So we made the decision to tender and be successful for this work. Being candid, for us as a charity, it has had its challenges and obviously its reward. The bureaucracy and evidence for EU funding, we all know, for me personally, sometimes detracts from the brilliant work that all the partners and the organisations involved have done. But ultimately, it's enabled organisations to deliver brilliant programmes that's really helped people either get into the job market or closer to the job market. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our partners who've worked with us so hard to deliver this programme, and sometimes in difficult circumstances. And I'd like to thank everybody from the Foundation Community Matters team for all your hard work and commitment in successfully delivering this programme. So a huge thank you from me and my board. So today you're going to hear from Forever Manchester, from Claire Lawless. They were commissioned to undertake an external evaluation on the whole programme. Has been a little bit challenging, particularly in a global pandemic, but they've achieved it. And Claire will be presenting the key findings today. You'll then hear from Kate from Just Straight Talk and Stephen from the Refugee and Migrant Centre about their experiences of delivering their particular programmes. I really hope you enjoy the session today. At the end of the presentations, there will be an opportunity to have a question and answer session. But for now, I shall hand over to Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. And thanks for inviting us today to share the findings of our evaluation. So just want to run through some of the key findings. And as Tina explained, you're welcome to ask questions towards the end. So I'm just going to start off with a quick recap of what Community Matters programme was about. As Tina says, it's about bringing people who are workless closer to the labour market and actually into work and into employment. But it was recognising that not just that end goal of employment or training, those end outcomes, but actually, you know, bringing people closer to that goal. So the programme was about £5 million across the 4 Black Country local authorities over a period of 4 years. And the target participants for this programme were workless people in the most deprived neighbourhoods of the Black Country. So obviously you're aware, a number of people on here will be aware of other programmes that are working towards similar goals. For Community Matters, it was about doing this engagement and supporting workless people who are probably quite vulnerable and facing multiple barriers to employment in a community setting and with a community-led approach, and supporting these people across all stages of their route to work, which isn't necessarily, you know, covering a whole range of issues around identifying barriers, giving them advice, and support with benefits, support with coping with life, support with confidence building. And so there was a whole range of different support as well as specific employability, you know, training, volunteering, work experience, that kind of stuff. So when this programme came about, and the reason for it was because there were above average rates of worklessness across the Black Country. And there was recognition that, as I say, people face multiple and complex barriers. We did a bit of baseline research on the 4 local authorities, and we identified barriers that existed locally to employment that were way outside of the remit of the Community Matters programme. So things like the the ratio of jobs per population was quite a bit lower than average in the Black Country. So part of the problem is not just the individual barriers that people face, but the structural economic factors that also add to that, and then other things that have happened during the delivery of this programme that have created barriers for individuals, such as the introduction of universal credit. So really want to make the point that this was a programme targeting the most vulnerable people, and in a location which was facing more challenging barriers around employment than your average. So Community Matters came about, and it's one of 4 BBO programmes in the Black Country. When we did some baseline research on unemployment, we started to recognise that the worklessness rates had begun to fall before COVID hit by March, and the gap between the local and regional and national averages of worklessness was beginning to fall. And I would think we looking at the evidence, we felt that locally targeted programmes and additional programmes like Community Matters and the other BBO programmes that exist are likely to have contributed to that change. So that was where we got to before COVID hit, and wanted to talk a little bit about what we've actually learned from our evaluation about Community Matters. So first of all, one of the strongest features was about engagement, and this map here shows you the people who are engaged in the programme, the beneficiaries, where they're located, and it's mapped against the index of multiple deprivation. So you can see the darker blue areas are the most deprived parts of the country, and the lighter blue areas are the least deprived. So from this, the programme has engaged over 2,000 people from the deprived parts of the Black Country. There is a good spread of locations and sort of quite urbanised contexts, and some a little bit less urbanised, and also that, you know, it's what I think nice about this illustration is that sometimes you might see a clustering of individuals around town centres and around urban centres, and I think, you know, because of accessibility issues, it makes it easier for those people to access services in the centre, but it just shows a good spread of people across the patch. So I think there's factors that explain that, which I'll go on to. So we looked at some of the data that the programme had collected, and we spoke with, well, we probably had about 30 case studies of individuals that we spoke to who had participated in the programme, and we looked at the data that the Heart of England and the project partners had collected. And we identified that of, you know, there's nearly 2,500 people engaged, and that many of them had shown benefits had achieved benefits in terms of reduced isolation, improvements in their personal confidence, improvements in their well-being. They'd gained new skills, they'd got opportunities volunteering. And one thing I wanted to point out about this journey to work is that every individual is different, and every individual accessed the support in the way that they, what they needed. So obviously not everybody wanted support with ESOL, or not everybody wanted IT training. So people were able to access the types of support that they needed, and it was bespoke to them. And as a result of those service users, we can see that there's been impacts at all stages of that route to work, and people becoming closer to the labour market. And in the end, over 500 of those target beneficiaries had secured employment or had moved into further education or training. So looking at what feedback we picked up from the service users about what worked and what they liked about the working in this way with the project delivery partners, the common messages that came from that was how easily accessible the support was. And I think that is an excellent feedback to have when you consider the constraints and the performance monitoring that is required, the evidence that is required to support service users, that they have to show supply various bits of evidence in order to engage in the programme, and for them to be able to say, we got this support quickly and it was easily accessible, I think is attributed to the delivery partners in how they managed that with the service users. People said their experiences were positive. They enjoyed being in the places where services were delivered, which I think is really important, because there's a strong sense of, with this target group, that a fear of statutory services and where they go to access those services, perhaps in a town centre. So people actually enjoyed the environments as very sociable, relaxed, flexible, that people could, engage on their own terms. As I said before, the type of service offer was commonly described as being bespoke to the individual, but also holistic, in that it wasn't specifically only about employability. It was about supporting people with a whole range of things as an individual. A strong message that came out of the service user feedback was getting a sense of belonging and feeling part of something, feeling part of a family was a phrase that was commonly used. I feel like, we're like one big family, and being able to connect with other people. And I think that was something that we picked up before the COVID pandemic hit. And then obviously when we were doing our research and we did some of the stuff shifted to by phone or online, that became even more important for people, that sense of connection and still being connected and still being remembered, and somebody knowing that, they were still there. So I think that was a really important feature of this, not just in terms of employability, but a whole range of well-being factors. And again, not to criticise mainstream services, but the other strong message was that people tended to find this type of service more useful to them than the mainstream service offer, which again supports what I'm saying about this being additional to the statutory services around employability, that, this is offering something different in a different way that is beneficial to this target group. And I think, you can see, I hope you've sort of noted some of the quotes that we picked up. There's a whole load more of them in our full report. Okay, so what worked about this programme? I'm just going to move the people across the other side because it's covering up my slides. Right, okay. So what worked? So in order to achieve these outcomes, what we identified as being the success factors for this programme were the use of community-led delivery partners, and it was a good call, and there was a lot of work getting the right ones. So it had to be people who had a certain amount of readiness to cope with the level of bureaucracy and administration and performance management and all of those factors.
From 07843 862825 for Louise Walker.
That sounds like a railway announcement then.
What was that?
I'm not sure.
Sorry about the minor blip. Carry on, Claire.
So what we commonly picked up, and this was supported by feedback from service users, from our own observations. We did observations and attended activities and did case studies, and we took feedback from the delivery partners and service users. And what our sort of collective thoughts around what worked for this programme is that the delivery partners that were selected and involved in delivering this programme really had a deep understanding of the very specific communities they're working in, the ecosystem of that community. They know it, and that was really important. As I've mentioned already, this programme is additional and it is alternative to your statutory provision. One of the things that the delivery partners did was about engaging people around their interests. So not just, oh, everyone come along, we're going to help you get back to work. It might have been around something more sociable, a group activity, a trip out somewhere, gardening or something like that. So people were engaged around something that was interesting to them, and the other stuff sort of came after. Again, I keep making this point about the holistic needs and tailoring the service to the individuals. The benefit of it being of the services based in the community setting. One of the messages that we take from this is about what works is go to communities in their places and their online places. So to reach these people, it's working to be in those communities. And there was a lot of the delivery partners were either based in the community or they were doing outreach work and delivering insights out in the community. So therefore the services were local, were accessible, people had an easy point of access, an easy point of contact. We picked up stories about people, they just happened to be passing and they saw something was going on and they joined in and they asked about it. So I think that has been quite a strong feature of this. Obviously, the delivery partners are trusted by the community. And I think that, when you're working with vulnerable people, as everybody around here will be familiar, that there can be a natural sort of suspicion with statutory services or fear. So, partners, the community trust these organisations. A lot of the staff and volunteers who are working in these delivery partners have often been people who have lived experience of some of the challenges that service users are facing. And it means that they can offer a real sense of empathy. But also, the feedback we got from service users was about being, one of the things that really mattered to them was about being viewed as a human and a person, as opposed to being viewed by their problem. So, I am a person, I am not disabled, or, they felt like they weren't viewed by their label. They felt that they were seen as a human. And I think that was very strong message that came out of this from the service users. Again, the environments, they seemed warm, welcoming, and people could drop in and out. I think there was a nice sense that, people were involved in structured activities, but that they felt they could just drop in for a cup of tea or just drop in and say hi. And, that sort of flexibility and that you know, ability to not have to be very structured or formal appointments was very valuable to the service users. And I think another strong message that came out of this, we identified lots of examples of service users who really valued the continuity of service, the continuity of the organisation, the continuity of the staff that they were working with. And we picked up stories about people who had built relationships with delivery partners over long periods of time, in some cases several years. And, you know, some of the stories from the service users reported examples of, you know, well, about 5 years ago, I lost my job and I came to this organisation and they helped me out and blah, blah, blah. And then they lost their job again and they came back again. So there was this sort of sense of continuity, and that happened over a period of years. And that was something that was quite a success factor and valued by the service users. So how did the programme do, and how did it compare to other programmes? So this table here shows that of the service users that were engaged, as I say, this is a bit driven by European funding in the sense of the outputs that are collected, the number of participants that secured employment, and the number that moved into further education or training. So the Community Matters programme achieved about 11% of their target beneficiaries accessing employment, 13% of them moved into further education or training. Now, the national BBO programme data, we compared the success or the impact of Community Matters against the national BBO programme evaluation data. And it shows that in the Black Country, the Community Matters programme performed as well as, if not better, than the national programme average data, which I think is a real success, a real measure of success, given that, you know, we identified earlier that there are some specific, locally specific, contextual, structural barriers that make it much harder to get people into work than you might find in somewhere like, you know, in a very urbanized city centre like Leeds, for example, or Manchester, where there are a lot of jobs and so on. So I think it's, you know, it's a strong message. It did well. In terms of value for money, we did a social return on investment analysis in line with the Cabinet Office guidance and HM Treasury Green Book guidance. And we took all of the different soft and hard outcomes that were recorded by the programme, and we quantified them, monetised them and adjusted them, and it returned a value of almost £6 per £1 of investment spent, which in public funding terms is excellent value for money and excellent return on investment. And just going back to the return on investment thing, the other thing I was going to say is when we looked at how that compared with other similar programmes, again, it was very high in terms of its value for money comparison with other similar programmes, and all of that information is in our full report. So the programme has ended, and obviously there was a lot of messages that I've just talked through about what worked and why and how. So what next? So we talked about what happened before COVID hit in terms of unemployment and worklessness. You can see here that the level of unemployment, sorry, let's go back. The level of unemployment has massively spiked as a result of COVID, which, you know, we all expected. And it also supports the point that the need for programmes like Community Matters is even greater today than when the programme first started. And not only has the COVID impact been huge, we still don't know yet what the full impact of that is going to be in terms of its economic impact and its impact on worklessness. But we do see that there is evidence to suggest that the Black Country is disproportionately affected. 3 of the 4 Black Country authorities are ranked in the local authorities that are most affected by COVID based on some evidence produced by Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And I think, you know, it's fair to say that is to do with the structural, the nature and structure of the economy in the Black Country and reliance on sectors that were hardest hit by COVID. So again, that kind of makes the operating context for programs like this even more challenging. So what do we take from Community Matters? Just to draw out a few conclusions, I think to summarise it, the programme has been able to reach people who did not engage with statutory services or did not like working with statutory services, and they were able to provide service in a way that mainstream services are not able to. Obviously, there is evidence to show that it was impactful and it was effective, and it achieved lots of diverse benefits to people, not only around, you know, the inclusion and well-being and confidence, but we picked up a number of stories around people who were, you know, suicidal, who had attempted suicide. So, you know, it's not, there's a whole raft of benefits that have been identified. And I think that it's a strong, you know, it's fair to say that this is very additional and complementary to your existing mainstream and statutory service provision. And I also want to make the point that the delivery partners are often small, they're often charities and social enterprises, they operate on a shoestring, and they are achieving a huge amount of benefit and value for a very small amount of money, and that shows in the value for money assessment. So I think that as a final conclusion, it's the Community Matters model shows that it is a good alternative approach to inclusive economic growth, which is something that has become much more important to us in today's climate. And in terms of moving forwards, how does the Black Country position itself for the new funding that has come out? Comprehensive spending review towards the end of last year announced a number of different funds around levelling up, shared prosperity fund, and the Black Country is very well placed to access these funds given that it's disproportionately impacted, the level of inequality that exists. And so moving forward to these funds, some of the things that we think are important to take and advise moving forward when addressing other programmes is that the challenges that programmes like the structural funds have created for community level organisations have been very difficult. And we've seen this not only in the Black Country, but in our work on programmes like this all over the country. We have seen organisations who are living in fear of being sued by government because they've not met targets or because of clawback, or, you know, we're talking about community-led organisations, and I think that it's a very challenging programme and restrictive for them working in that funding framework. I think that nationally determined programmes don't always reflect the hyperlocal context. We recognise with this and with other programmes, sometimes there are targets. We work, just to give you an example, we were working on a similar programme in Yorkshire, and they had a target about unemployed BME people, and the target was only slightly smaller than the actual population size of BAME people who were unemployed. So we said, you know, how can you possibly achieve this target, because there are not that many people there. So, these are nationally determined programs. They tell you, you've got to engage BA&E, you've got to engage this, they've got to engage that. What they don't always reflect the very specific local context. And I think that's a strong point to make when you are moving forward and applying for future funding to continue work like this, is that you need to really have that evidence base and understand that real hyperlocal context in which you're working. Targets for this programme, I think, were excessively high, and I think again that is another sort of legacy of European funding issues. I don't think that the targets that were set for this programme were realistic in the first place, or they were certainly very challenging, and perhaps didn't reflect the complexity of the needs of the service users and how much work and support they needed in order to make that journey. I think that another challenge with some of the traditional funding for employability programs is that this Community Matters, the holistic approach, is quite valuable for this group because these are people who need help with functioning in life before they can function productively in the workplace. And I think that when we're looking at employability issues with this group, that those wider needs need to be taken into account. There was a whole load of issues around European funding and how restricted it is. So, for example, outputs often couldn't be counted because they didn't meet compliance, and that's frustrating for projects. So if they worked with an individual over 5 years or 3 years, and finally that person left the project and 3 months later got a job, can't be counted because they've got to have got that job within 28 days of leaving the programme. And we see that in our similar evaluations across the country. It's a European funding thing, but it's restrictive for the projects in terms of them being able to demonstrate their success and the amount of paperwork involved. And we hear it all over the country, delivery partners, charity partners, they're paying things like bus tickets and stuff out of their own budgets because it's too much work to try and claim it back, which then creates costs for them and their organisation that they hadn't necessarily planned for. And I think also for future funding programmes, it's that timescale of delivery and that timescale of impact. We have been under a lot of, tight turnaround with European funding programmes, 3 years, 4 years. By the time you've got the delivery partners on board, by the time you've had a sort of first round and work out what works, and it's all being squashed into a very short time frame, and the time frame for impacts and achieving outcomes with the targets of this programme probably extends way beyond that. So I think in conclusion, the conclusion I draw from this is that community-led programmes can be very effective around addressing employability issues, but the funding mechanisms need to understand how community organisations work and be geared up in a way that supports them and doesn't detract from them actually doing what it is they're there to do, and detract from their mission and detract from the wider relationship that they have with their communities, which is really valuable. So remember what my next slide is. We're going on to Kate. If I could introduce Kate from Just Straight Talk and hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and good morning, everybody. As Claire said, my name's Kate, the project manager and founder at JST. I'm here for 5 minutes with you to talk about some positive impact from the programme and to hopefully give a real life example to some of those points that Claire's raised there around the support and around, I guess, the level of crisis and deprivation of an individual that would come through at point of referral. So, from our point of view, the positive impact was the life-changing support for people. Hundreds of people, absolutely. The feedback that came through was extremely positive, and many people would use those words: lifesavers, life-changing, and you know, something that was absolutely put them on that right path to the rest of their life, that they could turn around and say that was thanks to that the Community Matters project and the project itself. We personally thoroughly enjoyed delivering the Community Matters project. I've got some of the team here today. I had the right team from the beginning, which I think really helped. So thanks again to the JST Community Matters team. I think, again, the most obvious and important positive impact is the success and stories of the journeys of individuals that were supported over the 4 years, from Just Straight Talk itself, but also from many of the other partners throughout Community Matters. I hear of very similar stories and successes. Hundreds of stories, so little time. But for us, being the voice of people that would previously have fallen between the gaps, I can guarantee you that majority of people would not have been ready at point of referral for employment training and education at point of entry, like I said, due to the crisis and that level of deprivation at referral point. So for us, it was really about, you know, ensuring we met with people where they were comfortable, when they wanted to meet. If often that would mean for the first chat or for the first meeting that being within their homes, then so be it, where they were comfortable. And also being proactive to act really quickly that day if necessary. Obviously, some services, statutory services, that's not practical for them to act that quickly, but we had that flexibility and that approach to enable us to do that. We would look at tackling injustice, debt, benefit sanctions, appeals, obtaining crisis support grants, loans, housing for homeless people, and like I said, in words of many, being that lifesaver. So let me tell you about that real life example of Cynthia. I'll give you a quick snapshot of her support. Cynthia was referred to Just Straight Talk, and I remember the call coming in that day by Starbridge Job Centre as an urgent referral. She'd made an attempt of suicide on her life that day and jumped into the canal with the serious intent of ending her life. She was pulled out, and she actually went straight to the job centre after being pulled out of the canal there and then, and they called us. We got out really quickly, and it was obvious where the struggles were. Not only the benefit sanction, Cynthia had struggled with the mental health her whole life, and she'd faced childhood trauma, and her mental health was such that she tried to make some serious attempts on to end her life in the past. But at that point that we went out, she was living on £42 per month due to her carer's allowance being stopped from a family member who meddled and made a counter claim on the person that she was caring for day in, day out, which was her mother. A family member made a counter claim which stopped her claim and was suspended. So it showed on the system that she was receiving UC, but actually the £42 she was actually being counterproductive on her carer's entitlement. We made many phone calls that day through the DWP and with her advisor at the DWP called Rachel, and her Just Straight Talk Community Matters support worker also called Rachel. An investigation was quickly made underway and was going through the system. Whilst we were awaiting the decisions on that, Cynthia was seen almost daily, and support was given immediately to reduce bills and any of her outgoings as quickly as possible. So it's more than just money management. She needed heaps and heaps of reassurance, and a lot of that was given over the 12 months that Cynthia was with us. But in the early days, facing genuine hardship, her worker actually took Cynthia out and did a shop with her, and her dignity was more important than her food. She hadn't got any shampoo or conditioner. She couldn't get a comb or a brush through her hair. So it was really providing the shower gels, shampoo, conditioner, toilet roll. She'd neglected herself over the time because of what she'd been through and the lack of funds and the lack of anything really, and any support with her. So a worker put in a discretionary grant to myself, and that was granted, and went out shopping a day or so later. So Cynthia called the two Rachels, one from Starbridge Job Centre and the Community Matters JST worker Rachel, her Rachels, and during the time things started to slowly fall into place with the benefits, with lots of reassurance and support and reinstating the carer's allowance from that claim. Cynthia was a very warm and caring character herself, and ended up being in a very much better financially comfortable place with all of her benefits being reinstated, and actually went on to independently job search through the support of her JST worker. And I think it's that it's that reacting very quickly and being that phone call and that person day in, day out, but also on the days that the individual is not being seen, making sure that you're checking in and seeing how people are doing. There's some pictures and faces on the screen there in front of you. Many other stories, like I say, but we were really fortunate to have the right staff at the right time, and the paperwork came second, if you know what I mean. The paperwork was important. I'm sure the partners know what I mean here, but the support first and foremost was, let's get this done, let's do this with you, and then the next time I see you, this is what we need to do, X, Y, and Z, to move people onto the programme. And that was a crisis intervention that actually turned out into a positive result that I'm sure on the day Cynthia jumped into that canal would never have believed where she could be 12 months later. The case study speaks volumes. Many of our case studies are on the website if you want to have a look at the full story in total. But Cynthia said, I've looked forward to every meeting with Rachel. She's been my lifesaver. I've been rock bottom, but now I'm ready to move on up. All I want to thank you for at JST has been there for me. On to the next slide, please, Claire. I'm aware of the time, so I'll just move on to the development across the partnership and across the Black Country on the second slide, if that's okay. Thank you. We were able to build our reputation with Community Matters as an organisation that dared to care. Just back one, if that's okay. Being the voice of people and really promotion of the work we did across social media, marketing and promotion, and with our referral partners and referral pathways. So we were able to develop that partnership across the Black Country as a reputation grew and as Community Matters grew. We were able to develop our support to the wider communities. We started with provision and funding just for Dudley. Ben will remember many conversations about this. We ended with supporting people across the whole 4 boroughs, and our team went from 1 support delivery worker to 4. And we were, like I said, able to take referrals from the other 3 boroughs across the Black Country and build a base in Sandwell as well, which was really important to us. So we were also offered more funding through that service. Our team grew, so our staff developed. There was opportunities for promotion through Community Matters, which I'm really pleased to say helped our staff to develop into those roles and receive new skills. We were able to grow the team, staff skills increased, leadership increased, expertise in new areas, mental health benefits, housing support. Through our partnership approaches and working with partners, we worked together to make sure people got the right connected support at the right time. Marketing and promotion was really key, like I said, and raising awareness and promoting across Just Straight Talk, really using the Community Matters profile across the whole Black Country partnership. We were able to apply for the grants and apply for definite COVID kind of grants, and across that landscape be able to support more people, from carers to lonely and isolated individuals, to those that are facing redundancy, like I said, to those that are just coming out of being long-term sectioned, and to those that really were living right below the poverty radar in communities across the Black Country that needed that support most. So I think the legacy really is the hundreds of lives that have been changed for the better, but also we've been able to form a new partnership under the National Lottery called the Black Country Futures. It enables us to continue to work as a partnership, supporting more vulnerable people over the past year, which has been extremely trying given the pandemic, obviously. Still been able to provide that lifeline of support to the most vulnerable, but equally important, we're really proud to continue to be the voice of people that need the support the most. We're very grateful to the team at the Heart of England. We'd like to thank you very much for the opportunities it created, for your personalities and your support during the time of the project, but also personally my amazing team at JST and the support that they gave to people that needed it most at that time. Thank you. I believe that we're on to Steve at the RMC, so I'll look forward to that, Steve. Cheers.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Thanks for that, Kate. Just really going to follow up a little bit by talking some of the experiences we had at the Refugee and Migrant Centre. Obviously, the name kind of gives away that we support refugees and migrants. And a lot of the work we did was working with people who language was the main barrier for them. So they may have been referred to government, DWP funded type programs, but because they didn't speak English, they wasn't from England or the UK, so they didn't really understand processes. We did additional work with them to help them progress. In the first slide here, you got the picture of the Ahmed Ghassoon, who set up a shop in Wolverhampton. One of the things they didn't realise, and hence why we got out in the Express and Star, and I know the team of Heart of England was really supportive in trying to get as much publicity they could, was advertising that they needed to reach out to people broader than their own community to make their business success. So it was through this program we was able to do work with, with the marketing departments to get their good news story out there. We did a lot of work with people around language classes as well. That enabled people not only just to work on improving their English, but working on localised Black Country accents like mine and trying to understand them and things like that to enable their integration to society. And obviously, a lot of the time that we spent with people was talking about career paths and how to get that better job, how to move on into the future. So it wasn't just about getting the first job, but how they could develop in the future from there. If we move on to the next slide, I'll explain a little bit more on how it helped us as an organisation. And I think, the thing that we can't underestimate with projects like Community Matters and the other BBO programs that we've been involved on is that it's enabled charities like us to have paid, dedicated staff to deliver these services. RMC, our primary work is to support people with immigration case issues. Employment was something that we did, but it was part of someone's job where they did a few hours each week on it. Through these programs, we have now got teams of people who are trained, focused just on doing employability support to enable people to move forward. And it's this sort of legacy that produces the kind of results that make a real difference in people's lives. Again, structured ESOL classes for us was a major change. We've been reliant on volunteers doing sessions with people who was doing this part of studies, people who just needed a little bit of work experience maybe. So we was constantly changing. These programs have enabled us to employ people who are fully trained, are keen to develop people, and it's maybe be able to give us more structure to the services. Another thing that's really made a difference for us is the partnership working and our networking ability. As a charity, we were very, very well connected to other refugee and migrant services. But now we know people from all different walks of charities. If we come across someone that needs specific self-employment advice, we will refer them to Access to Business. Just straight talking, Dudley and Samuel, we've been doing partnership work and referring to each other, having conversations with people, which if it wasn't for programs like this, we probably wouldn't even know each other existed. It gave us funding to buy specific up-to-date equipment for people. So we brought PCs through this service where we could do IT classes with people. That then has led on now to tablet services where we've been able to keep in touch with people through all the lockdown and things like that as well. And it's more than anything, it's given RMC an absolute determination to carry on delivering this type of service in the future. We have an absolute focus now that this is invaluable work into people's integration as well. It's not just about helping people get their status sorted, it's about getting the permission to stay in the UK. It's about encouraging them to integrate fully in society as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. Could somebody lose the slides now, please, so we can have a screen? Who's in control of the slides?
It's me. I'm just,
Thanks,
just
Claire.
trying to suss it out.
But just while we do that,
there we go.